Today we're at Towne Pass. Above Death Valley, you're looking at the Panamint Range. And here's Sammy Glen's in the distance over there. And we're going to locate an SA-16 albatross that crashed over these hills, this ridge that you're looking at, back in January 24th, 1952. The plane was part of a joint Air Force CIA Cold War mission. There's our starting point below, and you can see based on the size of the, looks like volcanic boulders here, that, yeah, the going is a little challenging between the boulders and the brush, but we're heading up to the top of the ridge, taking this gully. Well, this first ridge is a real killer. There was at first just a steep incline from Highway 190 below, and that incline was covered with a lot of sage and huge volcanic boulders. But now we've reached this point, which is just below the very top of the ridge line. So let's get up to the ridge line, look around, and see what the world looks like up there. Having just topped this first ridge, which is a real killer. Look at these boulders. And this is a light bouldered section that you're looking at right now. So having topped the ridge, you can see the ridge line that we need to circle around those high points. You can actually see the crash from here. Let's see if we zoom in on it. Wow, that is just perched right on the edge of a cliff. Yeah, I believe that's the crash site. So yeah, you can't make a direct path to that site. The way to go is around to the right, then over the top. I believe that this would be Towne Benchmark or Towne Peak. And so we need to get up to the peak and then descend to the crash site, which is quite a descent from that peak. So yeah, there you have it. Wow, we've got a ways to go. This is why a less than 8 mile round trip can take at least 8 hours. And here's a quick 360. We're looking west toward the Panamint Valley, south to the higher points in the Panamint Range, Skidoo area, that ghost town, finding it on Las Vegas area trails, down Highway 190 toward Death Valley, and then circling around again so you can see the ridge line of high points that we need to navigate in order to get to the crash site, which is below and to the left. Okay, now that we're on the next ridge line, zoom in on the crash site. There it is. And you can see the ridge that we need to circle. So we continue up this way. You see a lot of ups and downs. And then there is that high point is Towne Peak or Towne Benchmark. And yeah, good view down into the Panamint Valley, and there is the town of Panamint Springs. Let's see if we can nail that. Yeah, there you have it, Panamint Springs. And here's Sammy. Congratulations for making it up that first ridge. I hear that's the toughest. What'd you think of it?
Unbelievable view up here. This was worth all the work to get up here.
And look at these boulders. This is tame compared to what we just left, isn't it? And now that we're on the ridge top, looks like there's a very faint trail. Maybe see the line of that trail progressing up to the next high point. And then looking back along the ridge. Panamint Valley. Mount Whitney. Onward and upward. First high point on the ridge top. You can see additional high points ahead. There's Towne Peak, and then it's a downhill to the crash site, which incidentally has disappeared, but you just have to eyeball it very good, carefully on the ascent where you can see it, so you know where you're going to circle around and descend. And look at this. Wow. Panamint Valley. Telescope Peak. And then over toward Death Valley. Not a good view from right here, but from Towne Peak, we're going to see everything. So, continuing along. Heading up to the next high point. There's Sammy and Glenn. And the little trail continues, which is unexpected and nice. So once you get to the ridge top originally, just look for the trail, follow the trail. This is looking back down along the ridge. And up we go. Okay, we've topped the next high point, and yeah, here's a good shot of the crash site from this perspective. So what we need to do is, as you can see, a couple other high points. This one over here, and this, and this. That's 3. And there's Towne Peak, or Town benchmark, and then down to the crash site below. So it gives you an idea where we are. And here's an interesting marker. Back toward the Panamint Range. Better shot at Telescope Peak, and now you can see to the left of it Wild Rose Peak. And then here's the ridge line we have been on. Panamint Valley. And continuing along to the next high point. Okay, here you can see the ridge line. We've been ascending. Here's an example of one of the canyons that we'll be passing. There is the next high point. And here we're looking toward Death Valley. Pretty amazing. Yeah, and Telescope Peak comes into larger view as we ascend. Telescope Peak on the right. Okay, and we're on to the next high point. You can see a little trail down there. Totally unexpected, but very helpful. This ridgeline is where Death Valley ended in 1994, and they expanded it in that year to move from a national monument to a national park. And here's a marker. In fact, let's move it around so you can see it in the right orientation. There we go. Pretty awesome. There's the ridge we've been on. And here's the next high point. Okay, a couple more high points. And you can see the ridge line that we've been traversing. And yeah, every time you think you're at the highest point, there's a huge dip. Look at that canyon below. And you see the canyon wash below. And then we look at the next dip. This is crazy. This is the dip before, believe this is Towne Peak or Towne Benchmark. So, yeah, huge descent, reascent, and yeah, there's Death Valley. Good view of Death Valley. I bet we can see more of the Panamint Range. Telescope Peak would be on the right, Wild Rose Peak on the left. How beautiful. Just amazing. What a land here. What a terrain. And here on this height is another marker. We just topped another high point. There's the ridge that we took on the way up. You can see how it circles around. Look at the rock formations over here. Pretty amazing. And then you can see how we're going to circle around and then head up to Towne Peak. So we didn't have to go down as far as I thought we might. Just stay on the outer edge here, the outer rim, and you're good. Yeah, this last slog up to Towne Peak is quite an ascent. And looking back, here you can see some of that ascent. And again, we circled around the ridge line and just rode the edge of the ridge line all the way from our starting point. Oh, here's a shot of the wreck. So we're closing in on it. Got a ways to go. approaching Towne Peak. The reason I stopped here is that you can see the ridge line leading down to the plane crash. And right down here is the plane crash. There's the crash site. So it's a matter of heading down this ridge on the other side of Towne Peak. And then, yeah, there's the Sierra Nevada. And this looks like the Panamint Valley. There is Telescope Peak on the right and Wild Rose Peak on the left. And then here's looking toward Death Valley. And there are the Funeral Mountains. And so the story about this crash is that the crew realized that the albatross wasn't going to make it over this mountain range, the Panamint Mountains, and so they bailed out over Death Valley. Two of them were injured enough on the bailout that they stayed where they landed. The other four headed, it would be a right turn at the base of the Funeral Range over there, headed down the valley to Furnace Creek. In the meantime, the plane on automatic continued to fly, and it flew over this area, skimming the area where we are potentially, or perhaps more likely, skimming the area right down there. And once it skimmed, made contact with that ridge top, it was pretty much finished. And it continued on down to the crash site. So that gives more of the story of what happened with the albatross. We'll see if we can find a point of impact on the ridge, but we need to take that ridge line down to the crash site. Okay, here we are on Towne Peak summit, and you can still see the plane crash from this spot, which is pretty amazing. There's some summit markers here. Here's one. And then here's the summit box and another marker. Towne Peak summit. And now we're heading down to the plane crash. And so far up to this point, if you can hike up to Turtlehead Peak, you could probably do this, except it requires more endurance, more elevation gain and loss. But yes, the terrain is not measurably more difficult. But hiking down to the plane crash could be another matter. Okay, we just passed this rocky outcrop on the ridge, and you can see that it is a bit more rocky than we've experienced so far. Here's some more ahead of us. And what we're going to do then is navigate over to this slope and head down the slope toward the crash site. You can't see the crash site now. Continuing along this rocky ridge line. And there you can see up to Towne Peak. Okay, and as you are navigating this ridge line, stay high on the ridge, otherwise you can get into trouble because it's very steep and exposed below. Even though there's a little trail that seems to take you around the lower side of this rocky area, don't do it. Stay high. And now descending from the rocky ridge, we're on a slope heading down, and it's definitely steeper than anything we've encountered so far. So let's just see how that all works out. Wow, look at the surroundings. And it looks like there's a piece of the wreckage down in this area. But I think that's beyond the main crash site. Okay, continuing down the slope. I had thought at first that we were going to be going down that neighboring slope, a lot steeper, but nope, not going to do that. And we descended from the ridge line. You can see the slope that we've taken. There are some switchbacks, faint switchbacks. You can lose them and then find them again, but they get you down. They help get you down. Don't depend on them totally, because they'll disappear. And yeah, now we are getting close to the area above the crash site. The 6 crew members bailed out over Death Valley, which was a smart move, because I can't imagine, it was dark, I can't imagine trying to land in this area. So they bailed out over Death Valley and then sent the plane on automatic forward, and that's where it skimmed the ridges there and then crashed over the edge of this area where you see Glenn and Sammy. So we're going to decide how to get down to the crash site. But yeah, it definitely was a good decision to bail out over Death Valley, and then you could see the lights of Furnace Creek, and it was about a 15-mile, little bit more maybe, hike to Furnace Creek through along the valley floor. Okay, we're closing in on the plane crash. From this vantage point, you want to head for that area, kind of flat and devoid of as much vegetation, at least as what we have around us here. So you want to head for that, and that's where we'll get an indicator where the plane crash is. That's pretty much right above the plane crash. And then looking over the Panamint Valley to the west, Sierra Nevada mountain range. And then here is the slope we just came down. So exciting. But so far, if you can do Mummy Mountain, look at the Mummy Mountain West video on Las Vegas area trails. If you can do Mummy Mountain, so far you're okay. Okay, here we are in the saddle that we saw from above. And there's a climber's box here. I believe it has materials for climbers to, water. So if you're stranded up here, you run out of water, there you have it. Okay, and then here is the slope we have been descending. And this is a kind of decision point where we go around the corner here, and then we should be able to look down and basically see where the plane crash is. So let's do that. And here you see where we're rounding this rocky ledge area, rocky slope, whatever you call it. Yeah. So we're going to round that and then find a way down to the crash site. Just to give perspective, yeah, that's the ridge that we descended, and then Towne Peak is up in this area. Okay, down we go. There goes Sammy. Okay, this section is very, very steep. This is heading down to the plane crash site. There you see Sammy navigating some steep, loose rock. And Glenn headed down the even steeper section, but has solid rock. Pick your poison. And then just to get an idea what we've been coming down. Yes, there it is. Super steep. Very loose. You don't want to lose your footing. Okay, down we go. Okay, here's our first close look at the crash site. Look at that. We're not there yet. You can see Sammy navigating the steep final 50 yards. And David has to navigate this to get down there. Glenn went over the edge of this class 4 area, which is an alternate way for people who either love to climb and are very good or are crazy. I'm not doing it. And then there is looking up the trail. This last stretch, yeah, this is definitely the stretch of the whole adventure that is going to be the most difficult. Just don't lose your footing because you start sliding, you're not stopping. And here's the final stretch. And no, it has not leveled off any. It's just so steep, but you at least can see all the way down to the main crash area, the fuselage. And here I'm on a better area to stand so I can give a better look up the trail to the ridge above. And this is pretty much the section that is most difficult. I would say for this section, if you can climb the east side of Mummy Mountain, then you should be okay. But yeah, it's even steeper than the west side. Here we are at the Albatross. That was an exciting little plunge down that last trail. Speaking of plunge, there's the gully where more pieces of the Albatross fell down, washed down that gully. That must have been an amazing impact. And it was in total darkness. January 24th, 9 p.m. Well, the bailout was at 9 p.m. This is probably like 9:05 at the most. And this is looking back up the trail, if you could call it a trail. Yeah. And then here's looking where you will go if you slide on the rocks. But it hasn't been horrible. It's been pretty good. Trail, just take it step by step. Glenn's the climber in the group, and he's got to climb all over everything. And here he is coming out the window of the Albatross. And then, yeah. Just be careful. We don't want to carry you down. Wow. Glenn has found one of the seats. He says it is totally secure, but I don't know. There it is, the seat with Glenn climbing on it. So the crew would have bailed out the rear of the aircraft down in this direction. You can see part of the floor there. Wow. And there's Glenn way up there. A lot of sharp stuff up there. Wow, look at this. There's the engine. So if you are a mechanic, Air Force mechanic, you probably can name everything we're looking at. Yeah, this is a good testament to the wisdom of that decision to bail out over Furnace Creek, because you don't want to have been in this plane when it impacted like this. Wow. One last look. It's been here 70 years. Still fairly good condition. But imagine that impact. Wow. Okay, heading back up. We need to head up the slope to the ridge up there and then over to the summit of Towne Peak, and then it's downhill. There's some uphill, definitely, but more down than up along the ridge line and back to Highway 90. Speaking of Highway 90, there's a shot of Highway 90. Okay, here we go. Another perspective. Good shot of the tail section. Back on terra firma, above the crash site. Now, basically the main thing is getting up to the benchmark peak up there, and then it's more downhill than uphill for the rest of the trip. And take a look at this, the Sierra Nevada range right through this opening. Okay, here we are in the floor of Death Valley. I just wanted to make a note about that walk that the 4 crewmen made from where they parachuted out over Death Valley. The plane actually came over the Funeral Mountains, the Grapevine Mountains. There's the range there. And one of the engines failed at that point, and the crew knew that they weren't going to make it over this next range, and so they bailed out somewhere in the center of Death Valley. And then the albatross continued on up and crashed into the mountains on the Panamint Range. So the crew, it was 9 o'clock p.m. in on January 24th, total darkness. So the crew had to bail out in darkness and then walk through this valley. And if you look down where the salt pan is, They had to walk to Furnace Creek, and they had to walk through that salt pan. Maybe they came, they angled up a little more out of the salt pan, but Furnace Creek is directly across that salt pan from here. And so that would have been a 14, 15-mile walk in the dark through the salt pan. And um, if they angled a little above the salt pan, you can see what kind of surface they were walking in the dark. Lots of um, small gullies, canyons, rocks. It must have been quite a walk. Two of the crew members were injured in the bailout, and so the crew members stayed over in this area. The injured crew members, and then the four others walked all the way to Furnace Creek, and then um, brought some rangers back to rescue the two that were injured. So pretty amazing story.